Hello and welcome to my presentation using the fact-value dichotomy to provide ethical considerations regarding social scientists and public policy and advocacy. So going right into it, science, morality, and politics have always been entangled subjects. They, for as long as human science has been studied, we've been discussing morality and politics along with it and how to separate those or if they should be separated. Today I'm gonna use the fact-value dichotomy to take a closer look at science, morality, and politics. So the fact-value dichotomy basically says that values and facts are not the same, and values cannot be derived from facts. So what ought to be cannot be derived from what is. David Hume and Immanuel Kant were the first to start discussing this, and then later on, G.E. Moore, another philosopher, termed it the naturalistic fallacy, basically saying the same thing, that there's no connection between facts and values. So any ethical statement about what is good or bad or right or wrong cannot be derived from natural events. This might be a little bit easier to put into perspective when we consider applying it to politics. So in the pro-life and pro-choice debate, there has been studies that have come out saying that women's rates of depression following abortion are no higher than rates of depression for women who've brought an unwanted pregnancy to term. So right away, people may be tempted to say, well, that proves that pro-choice is right and pro-life is wrong, but actually the fact still remains objective. So it's a fact that a woman's risk for depression is not increased following an abortion, and that fact could be used to support a pro-choice stance, but it does not prove that a pro-choice stance is morally superior. Instead, people supporting the pro-life stance would probably just say, well, the act of terminating a pregnancy is still wrong, regardless of whether the mother has a higher risk of depression. And then in regards to the debate on climate change, the same ideas can be applied. So politicians can advocate for stricter laws to decrease negative impact on the environment by citing countless studies that talk about how climate change affects wildlife and weather and food production, but still those facts reported in those studies remain objective, and it's up to the person interpreting the facts to apply any sort of moral value to them. So, for example, a scientist could report that industrial farming is contributing to the destruction of wildlife, but it's up to the voter to decide whether they value wildlife more or less than they value industrial farming. So in that case, the values of an industrial farmer would likely be significantly different from the values of someone like a marine biologist. And then what's moral depends on what a society declares to be moral. So Walter Lippmann said the moral choice is the democratic choice. Public interest can be revealed by the political processes of a democratic society. So the society itself expresses their public interest, and that's what becomes morality in that context. So we've discussed how facts cannot prove that a public policy is morally right or wrong, and psychologists do not have the power to declare moral truths based on the science of psychology. When they do start to do that, we start going down a road that we probably don't want to be going down. In the Kendler article, we spoke about how when we behave as if moral truths can be revealed through our conscious experience, we're making the same assumptions that were used to justify the values of Nazism in World War II. So psychologists should not be claiming that their science is any direct route to moral truth. The moral truth is it's completely subjective, while scientific facts need to be objective and are objective. This also runs risks to the reputation of science. So scientists need to make sure that they emphasize that there is that clear distinction between the role of a scientist and a role, any other role, such as somebody like a political advocate or a policymaker. Scientists can still advocate for public policy in their personal time as individual citizens. They just cannot be doing that as professional scientists and using their profession as some sort of support to back up their moral beliefs. Scientists provide the objective data, and that's their role. And then it's the citizens who can use that data to make policy decisions according to their personal beliefs. Richard Atkinson, who's a psychologist, had a good quote that I wanted to include, which was, "To permit psychology to be misused as an advocate for public policy will lead inevitably to the demise of the field." And going along with that, there's definitely risks to the reputation of science when psychologists begin trying to include their own political agenda and insert that into their research findings. It can discredit everything that they're reporting, because once somebody senses that there's a political agenda behind it, they might become a lot more skeptical, and rightly so, because scientists should only be presenting the objective facts. So there's a good quote from Kendler here on this as well. All psychological research is viewed with suspicion when only some are designed to achieve political goals. Thus, both society and psychology suffer. Society loses the benefits of sound psychological knowledge that can guide the formation of sound policy, and psychology loses the respect and support of democratic society that is needed to achieve its scientific potentialities. So talking about all this, we are reminded that scientists still are following an ethics code, and that might seem kind of counterintuitive at first, because aren't we saying that science cannot say what's right and wrong, and isn't an ethics code doing just that? But we can look at it in a different way, rather than the ethics code being a list of moral truths. They're actually just actions or functional properties that enable science to operate productively and effectively in our current social context. So these are just the things that work right now, the pragmatic things to allow science to operate in its most effective way at this time in this social and political society. And then, like we said, scientists are not required to adhere to the ethics code in their personal lives, but their behavior in their personal lives still has the potential to be viewed by the public. So they need to consider how they are behaving, how that will be perceived by the public, and how that will affect their professional relationships, even if they're doing these things in their personal time. It's still possible that the public will be observing this, and that can change the public public's perception of a psychologist or a behavior analyst. It could make potential consumers or clients uncomfortable with continuing to work with that particular therapist or professor or supervisor. And it can also